Dan. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to give a little brief rundown of the ward so far and what we've been up to. My name is Jacob Fry. I'm the newly inaugurated City Council member for the 3rd Ward, which includes the 4 neighborhoods anyway that helped put this whole presentation up. So thank you for being here. This is what community engagement is all about. I was sworn in on January 6th. I have hired 2 staff people. One of them, his name is Jay Ludke. He was my campaign manager. So obviously he's got quite a bit of experience in organization. He's also worked for both the federal and the state government for about the last 20 years or so now. So he's got quite a bit of policy experience as well. And then the second person is Heidi Ritchie. Heidi has been the aide for Gary Schiff, former council member Gary Schiff, for the last 8 years. So she certainly knows her way around City Hall. It is shocking how many extraordinary things and how much money we have that's just being dumped into the 3rd Ward right now. It is, I said during the campaign that this place is just jam-packed with potential, and I didn't even really realize the full scope of it. It is just blazing with potential. Obviously, we've got the Redevelopment project, which I won't steal the thunder from anybody else tonight, but that's, I think, is going to be an extraordinary project. We've got the 2.5 blocks worth of park that's going between the stadium and moving towards the downtown. We're looking to fund a substantial amount of that park based on the sale of the air rights to the parking ramp, which is just between sort of the Wells Fargo complex and then the stadium. And I can tell you that we've been pitching it to many different developers at this point, and we're going to get a wonderful deal and a beautiful site as well. So that's the first piece we've got. We're also undergoing a redesign of Nicollet Avenue. Nicollet Avenue presently has $20 million allocated by the governor and his proposal, and Representative Raymond Dean, who's sitting right in front here, is doing an extraordinary job and really pumping that thing through. And this redesign is going to be thinking beyond the traditional, 1980s anal retentive style where you just throw up a whole bunch of lampposts and banners, and it's going to be impressive. And it will really highlight the city, the state, and I think it'll be a highlight of our whole region. Second piece. Third piece, and I won't talk for too long, I promise, I'll shut up in a second here, is one of the big pieces that I campaigned on was bringing a new school to downtown. We have really 2 demographics. We've got yuppies and we got empty nesters and really nothing in between. And we don't have the anything in between because of the lack of a viable option for the school. Well, every single time when I door knocked, we would write down school if somebody said, I'm interested in a school. And so then we had a list of about 300 or 400 people by the end of the campaign. And when it came time for the school board to start deciding what happens, we shot an email out, did a little bit of organization, and got a whole bunch of people out to these meetings. And now we have $30 million that is going to be dumped into this new school, which it's an existing building. It's called Webster. It's just across the river from here. It's going to be a community public school. There are several individuals in this room right here, Eric Laska being one of them, parents who are extremely invested in this process. And this, I guarantee you, will be one of the best elementary schools in the entire city. It's going to be a K through 2nd to start with, and then they add a school year each year. So first year of K through 3rd, K through 4th, K through 5th, etc. So I can keep talking forever, but this area is packed with potential, and it will only realize that potential if all of you continue to be engaged just like this. So continue coming to the meetings. Please reach out to my office. My phone number at the office is, I shouldn't have started. Yes, is 612-673-2203. 673-2203. I would love to hear from you. So thanks, enjoy the show, and do you have a quick moment for Representative Raymond Dean, just to say a couple things here?
I just want to say, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. There's about to be some big changes here, and having everybody engaged is going to help that happen. I didn't have the ability to vote on the stadium. I wasn't in the legislature at that time. And to be honest, there are some days that I'm really glad that I didn't have to take that vote, because it does get pretty controversial from time to time. But as Jacob mentioned, the governor's bonding bill had $20 million for Nicollet Mall. The bill I submitted is asking for 25, and I think we'll keep pushing to try to up that 20 million up to 25. And it's going to take folks like you calling, not just me, but also your friends that live in other parts of the state or other parts of the city, telling people how important Nicollet Mall is not only to our city, but to our whole state and to the Commons. It really is the main street of Minnesota. So if all of you can do that, that would be great. I'm not going to go on. The session starts February 25th, but we're already working. Committee meetings are happening all the time. So I remind folks, if I started really, really late, you still get a lot of work from legislators, but you don't have to pay us per meeting. So I think that's a good thing for all of us. So I'll turn it over.
And thank you, Representative Dean and Councilmember Fry. It's fantastic to have engaged elected leaders that are here tonight and engaged in all that's going on. Many leading voices are needed. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the pieces of this, the Downtown Minneapolis Neighborhood Association represents the interests of nearly 40,000 people who live, work, and own property in the downtown community. The Mill District Neighborhood Association exists to engage those living in the historic mill and riverfront spaces in addressing the needs and concerns of aspirations of all who work, live, and play here. The Elliott Park Neighborhood Association continues to play a vital role in the evolution of Elliott Park neighborhood by actively pursuing its mission to bring people and resources together to preserve and promote the unique urban character of that historic space and neighborhood. And finally, the East Downtown Council, well, we like to consider ourselves the Switzerland of all these incredible neighborhoods, in that we absolutely find ourselves as neutral advocates with passion. Be like that. Neutral advocates with passion for the economic vitality of the entire district, which is 4th Street to the highway and the river through Elliott Park to the highway on the other side, and collaborating with the Central Business District. And I have the privilege of meeting warehouse executive directors with their business associations, and I'm getting to know the West Bank Association. So we're finding ourselves in collaboration, considering the whole. And for those of you who know, there are 180 businesses in this part of town, and our goal as Business Council is to build value through private and public initiatives, be a critical source of information for our constituents, and this may be the most important. Collaborate with all the parts of the downtown Minneapolis community for the common good. So, we have a lot to cover tonight, and it's nothing more, there's nothing more fun than to not just talk in the abstract, but in the concrete. And so what we have for you, and we're going to tee up here first, is the Ryan Companies doing the Downtown East Redevelopment Project. And then we'll do a Q&A after they do their presentation. And then we're actually going to have Bob Lind and Miles Mercer, and there's called Beth Elliott, I was told, also is here to answer questions for that RFP that Councilmember Fry just mentioned, related to the park and related to the Ryan proposal. We'll have Q&A for that, and we will complete the evening at 8 o'clock. Okay, well, I'd like to introduce the two presenters for Ryan Companies. Rick Collins is the Vice President of Development. He's worked with Ryan Companies for more than 14 years, specializing in commercial real estate projects. He was featured in the Star and Tribune as, the top 10 people that we should be watching in the year to come. It was an impressive little nod, because he has 28 years of veteran experience in commercial development. He has been the president of Welsh Companies, president of the Minnesota chapter of NEOP, and I can just kind of go on. He's really an important figure in this. Mike Ryan is 4th generation member of the Ryan family. He's the Director of Architecture and Engineering for Ryan Companies, and prior to that role, he was a project manager and architect for the esteemed Robert A.M. Stern Architects in Manhattan, New York. And for those who may be interested, he was the lead designer for the 222 Hennepin project, which was the mixed-use multifamily development on Hennepin Avenue. And I'm going to now turn it over to these fine leaders to take us through their presentation.
I know some days you don't need this. I'm going to do without the microphone. It's never been hard
hard for me to be heard in the past. How many of you were here in June for the unveiling of our design? Okay, I anticipated we might get 50 or 60% overlap. We are not going back through that whole design, although Mike has, I'm Rick Collins, by the way, that's Mike Bryan. Mike will have some more updates on our design.
In case you were wondering who the 28-year vet was.
Red-haired Irish stepchild. So we are going to give you updates on where we are, and yet we're happy to answer whatever questions you may have, subject only to our time limitations. We're joined tonight by other Ryan family members, well, I should say company members. I don't want to confuse the issue. Tony Barranco, who's also a condo owner in the neighborhood here. Tony Barranco is a vice president of development like me, and he is responsible for the residential portion of this. Jeremy Jacobs is driving the bus today technologically. He's another Ryan colleague. Bob Parr is in the back. Bob keeps us all moving in the right direction. And on my development team, and Elizabeth Campbell here, and we'll speak a little bit more about Elizabeth's role later, but Elizabeth Campbell is here from Ryan. So we're here to answer whatever questions you may have, and with that, we'll launch right into our agenda. Tony, oh yeah, thank you. Housekeeping item. Many of you may already be on our email list. You may have seen us, you may have seen an email from us. If you would like to be on our email list, we're going to circulate a little Ryan tablet. All you have to do is print your name so we know who you are, because some emails aren't evident. And then print your email address. That's all we need. We don't need anything other than that, unless you'd like us to have your phone number for some reason. And we'll circulate it on that tablet. And we'll collect that at the end. Another housekeeping item, because I may forget it later, we used to call this project East Village. So if you went to the Ryan Company's website, you would see this under East Village. Now we have changed it so that we have a very complete website. It's a bit impersonal to communicate through a website, but it's easier for you to find information. And you go to ryancompanies.com/projects/downtown-east. And if you can't remember all that, you'll find your way there once you get to ryancompanies.com/projects. And so we have a lot of media that's been there. We've got all the design information. So if you want to catch up with what's going on, we've got the video there. So you can see much of what you're going to see tonight, plus a lot more. I'm going to give you a brief update on the approvals and agreements we've already achieved and the things that we still have to achieve in the very short term here to get to a land closing, which we are aiming for next Friday. We have a project organization chart, not just the Ryan people, but all the various team members that you're going to see in the big picture. And I'm going to introduce one of our team members here tonight. Mike will give you a design update. We'll talk just briefly about a North Parcel development update, and I'll tell you what the North Parcel is when we get there. We'll talk about the park design process and where that goes from here. We'll talk about our efforts at inclusion, bringing minorities and women businesses into the fold, as well as minority and female tradespeople. We'll just give you a look ahead at the timing of groundbreaking. And then we have already scheduled another meeting that I think Dan and others will tell you more about, but we're looking ahead to that meeting in May in terms of what you can expect to hear from us at that point. Go ahead, Sharon. Everybody see this pretty well? Okay. The City Council in the months of November and December approved many things. The first such approval was a very complicated environmental review known as an AUAR, Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review. That looks at noise, traffic, air quality, stormwater, other issues that are the impacts of the development. And the City Council at its November 1st meeting found that our AUAR and the proposed mitigations were adequate, that's all we're looking for is adequate. It's not like you can get a great, good, or just okay. Adequate is what we're looking for, and that's what we got. We had approval of our plan unit development, which is all the planning that goes into the design. There are many aspects to that, and if you have questions, Mike will be happy to answer them. Notice I didn't volunteer. We applied for and received approval of an application to demolish what's known as the Star Tribune headquarters, which we know by its address 425 Portland Avenue. That is a city council action that gives us the ability to next apply for a demolition permit at the appropriate time. And so we received that approval. There were some folks from the neighborhood that actually were part of the testifying. Dan was there. Some of the neighborhood was there as well to testify about the importance of the proposed park relative to the historic value of 425 Portland. We received City Council approval of the bond resolution that is necessary for the city to issue two bond issues totaling about 60 to 65 million, about 20 million for the park and about 40 million for the parking ramp and 5 million for other costs. So that was approved in December, so now we have to go through the bond issuance. And then we received City Council approval of the term sheet, which is sort of the business terms. That was simultaneously approved by the board of the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority at its board meeting on December 13th. So December 13th, which happened to be a Friday the 13th, was a big day for this project. And that term sheet then is the City Council's direction to staff to negotiate a full development agreement with Ryan. So the development agreement does not come back to council so long as, in the opinion of staff, it doesn't deviate substantially from the term sheet. The City Council substantially approved our preliminary design review. That's a little separate subset of all the planning that went into the plan unit development. We've been continuing to work on minor issues back and forth as our plans have evolved and as the questions have been answered and that sort of thing. And Wells Fargo and Ryan, this is listed as number 4, but it might as well have been number 8 or 1 because this is a very important document. Wells Fargo and Ryan executed a purchase agreement on December 16th by which Wells Fargo committed to purchase roughly 1 million square feet of office space as part of the project. That was something we've been working on for nearly a year, and we finally got the ink to dry after we received the City Council approvals and the MSFA approvals and other things. So as you can see, we had a lot of accomplishments in November and December. Let's go now to what we have yet to achieve. I mentioned before the term sheet was approved. We are now working on the conversion of that to a more legal document known as a development agreement. That will be a tri-party development agreement, the city, the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority, and Ryan. And so that will set forth our obligations. Those of you who were here in June heard a more in-depth explanation than I was prepared to give tonight about how we're using parking revenue from MSFA-owned parking ramps that Ryan will manage to allow Ryan to make a committed stream of payments over the first 10 years minimum that will allow the city to structure its bonds so that our payments take care of debt service for at least 10 years. So that's what gives the city the revenue to make the bond issuance that they're doing. There is no tax increment financing or other sort of obligation involved in this project. And so we essentially are guaranteeing the first 10 years of 30 years worth of bond debt service. And the city actually doesn't take responsibility until and unless the parking ramps get to a certain threshold of operating income, $4 million, that will allow that parking ramp, if it just keeps going, to pay the remainder of the debt service. So the city, when Ryan is relieved of our obligation on the guarantee, the city should be in good shape for that continuing debt service from parking revenue. So that's why all of those things are involved in a very, more complicated than I'd like to admit, a tri-party development agreement. We also have a parking agreement that's a subset of that, but that spells out all the specifics of that parking ramp. Operations, construction, long-term maintenance, etc. The city and the MSFA, by the way, when I use the term MSFA, I really should say MSFA and Vikings every time because they're really tied at the hip. The Vikings as tenant and substantial payer of the stadium, well, I won't say that, as a payer of the stadium. I'm sorry, who stepped in at first? Probably me. The Vikings are a third-party beneficiary of entities, so they negotiate every single document as well. But the Urban Park License Agreement, Ryan is not a party to. That is between the city and the MSFA and Vikings. And it relates really to the rights that the Vikings have, and to the extent there are other MSFA event days that are non-Viking related, how all of those work with the park utilization. You're going to hear more from Mike later about the park committee. That's more design focused. This is more about the legal rights for utilization of the park. And if you have more questions about that, I'm not sure I'd put that on Bob Lynn. Is Miles Mercer coming tonight? Oh, Miles is in the back, oh, he looks like the rugged mountain man tonight. We are working on a construction agreement for the parking ramp and skyways between Ryan and the Sports Facilities Authority. And all contingencies have to be waived by all parties so that we can close next Friday, because under no circumstances do we want to be the proud owner of 5 blocks of land in downtown Minneapolis and find out that our project does not go forward because some contingency hasn't been satisfied. There are 2 very important contingencies we're working on, actually turned into 3 today. Some of you may have been reading about the recent lawsuits. There was one filed by Doug Mann. Doug, do you happen to be in attendance? Just want to know. Versus Jim Showalter, who is the commissioner of the Office of the Management and Budget of the state. And so that's really a suit against the state of Minnesota, seeking to get relief that says that the state can't issue its bonds for procedural and technical reasons that I'm not qualified to talk about. But today, Mr. Mann filed a companion lawsuit against the city of Minneapolis that relates back to the lack of a referendum and some of these things that have been going on for a number of years. Those of you that pay close attention may fully be aware of. In addition, 3 folks that have been strongly affiliated with the city of Minneapolis, Paul Ostro, Stephanie Woodruff, and Dan Cohen, filed a suit against the city of Minneapolis, to which the park board was then added as a defendant, suggesting that the city has no legal stature to allow it to buy a park. That only the park board has the stature to do that, and that the park board must ultimately be the manager. I was at a hearing yesterday morning in Hennepin County District Court. We hope to get resolution on this suit to at least allow the city to acquire. And I don't know that we'll be able to get both of these squared away before next Friday, the 24th. A lawsuit like this puts a cloud over a bond issuance. It may or may not be coincidental, the timing of the lawsuit filings. Who am I to say? But we can't proceed if bond buyers will not buy because of the uncertainty surrounding the bonds. And so, in addition to very intense work on all the agreements that are only shown up there as individual line items, we have to get through some lawsuits in the course of, or at least know where we're going in the course of the next week.
So Rick, if I could just let you catch your breath and summarize that. The schedule we laid out in the summer involved getting the project fully entitled. So that was achieved in essence in December. So what's left is building permits and demolition permits, that sort of thing.
Those of you who paid attention to our schedule know that we intended to acquire the Star Tribune land on December 27th. And we were unable to do that in part because of lawsuits and in part because of agreements. They were not fully completed. And so we are now operating within a 30-day, essentially what's truly a cure period. We have that 30-day period to acquire the Star Tribune land, which expires on January 27th. So all of this keeps me up at night, to say the least. Let's go ahead to the next one, Jeremy. It's not critical that you read all these names. I just wanted to let you know that there are probably 40 or 45 or 50 people at Ryan who are working on this project almost full-time or a significant part of their day. And yet all of these other boxes represent other firms who have added value along the way in our pursuit. Now, part of what this represents is the risk that developers like us have to take in order to pursue projects of this complexity and size, because all of these folks are professionals that work typically on an hourly basis, and so we have to incur all of these team formation and billings in order just to get to this point, and yet there are many uncertainties as I just described to you. So these folks are working very hard. I'm not going to tick through their individual contributions, but it's a large team, and in our main meeting, we'll be getting a little bit down deeper so that you know some of the individuals as we move forward that you may want to communicate with if you have concerns, you have questions about the project, that sort of thing. So I think you can go on, Jeremy. Mike.
Wonderful. So message there is it really takes an army to get us this far, and we're very grateful for all of our partners that are out there working so hard. I think Rick mentioned 40 to 50 folks at Ryan, I'd say there's at least that amount outside of Ryan also working. So, just want to pause here for a minute. Jeremy, our last presentation that we gave to this group was a very thorough exercise explaining what we had designed and why we had done that. Again, as Rick mentioned, we're not going to go back and repeat that, but we went through, the sizing of the park, what a park would do for the neighborhood, why office, how the Skyway connects. So I would explain or categorize all of that as really trying to help you understand our thought process. Today, we're going to take a different approach and do a 3D animation and walk through the project. Hopefully what you come away with is more of an experiential understanding of what it is going to be like, what it may be like to walk down the streets, that sort of thing. And then we'll use that to sort of come back and talk about a few points. I'm going to focus on specifically what's changed since the last time we were all together. So go ahead, Jeremy. So this is excuse me, are we as focused as we can get? Or is this a projector issue?
It's probably a projector.
Okay. Well, those fuzzy buildings in the background, of course, are downtown east. There you can get a good understanding of the relationship of the park to the stadium. And then we're just passing City Hall here on the left. So Jeremy, do you want to pause it right here for me? This is a great spot. No problem. Great spot to talk about the park building, which is an addition from the last time we met. Part of our, oh, look at that. Dan, all right. Bailed me out. All right, let's pause it right there. Part of what we had contemplated from the beginning was how much land would become park. That was an ongoing discussion with the city. And at our last meeting, we talked about the fact that this last third of the park may or may not be developed as part of the original project. We made a determination some months ago that it would be. And so that will be developed as a 6-story residential building, which will really operate in conjunction with these other low-rise residential buildings that are on the front of the office towers. One marked advantage that was noted at the planning committee is the more eyes you get on these parks, the safer they are in a 24-hour sense. So there was certainly a lot of optimism about that, and we'll get into some of the details of that as we go through. So there you can see the Wells Fargo buildings. The signage is noted where the signage was approved, which is on the bookends of the project, and then on the park facade. So that's the signage that was published in the paper. We are currently underway trying to pass a resolution that would allow for the roof signage that you may or may not have read about. So that is still pending. The buildings are about 300 feet tall, so about the height of the brow of the stadium, a little taller, and lower than the tower of City Hall by 75 feet. Go ahead, Jeremy.
How many housing units is that on?
Yeah, so these 3 properties, the 2 smaller ones in front of the office buildings and this, will all serve as about 200 units.
Jeremy, can you pause again, please?
So about 40 in each of these, and 120 on the park side.
This is simply a representation of something that might occur, but that is part of the parcel that the city put its RFP out. So we might didn't count that in this unit count.
So that is undetermined what that will be, but that would be in addition to the 200. You can also see the roads are back in place here, Park and Portland. That was something that we made the decision to no longer propose that those would be closed some time ago. That decision will be left for others. Those would all be apartments, yeah. We did explore briefly condos, and there's certainly some reason to do that, but we've made a determination that apartments are the sound approach right now. So you can see the Skyway connection, of course. This is a major component of the project that would connect you to the stadium, critical to attract some of the events like the Super Bowl, BCS, Final Four, that sort of thing. Go ahead, Jeremy. So the park design that you're seeing here has no bearing on what actually, you want to pause right here, might be. The park committee, which I'm going to get to after this, will talk about, I'll hint at what that is going to be. So this is just our representation of what one look may be. So now, does everyone know where they're at oriented? We are on the corner of 5th and 4th. So the park is coming up on the right. The stadium is in the background. You get an impression of, from 3 blocks away, just how large that stadium is. And then the Wells Fargo buildings are apparent on the left. One thing that I love about this view is it really shows you what the park building combined with the building adjacent to the Wells Fargo project, it kind of creates this gateway to the park. So you're going to have this bookended framed view when you come into the park space with the stadium in the background. So go ahead, Chairman. I'll actually pause it right there. On the right, that is the main lobby for all of those residents. So if you live in this building or in the next building down, this is still your main lobby. Most of your amenities, so some of your club room and your fitness center would be over here. We are planning for some ground level units. There'd be a bit more loft-like units for the first half of that block. Then there's a small ancillary lobby for the residents that would be in those individuals. That's where you come in and get your mail. And then each of the residential buildings has a retail space closest to the Wells Fargo entry. So that size for restaurant, I always give for context, it's smaller than the local, larger than Barrio. So that helps frame that for you. And then one more retail space would be on the park side. So this area right here would be a retail space, slightly smaller, but that would have a walkout open patio onto the park. So sort of interesting dynamic. So 3 key retail spaces in addition to the Skyway. Go ahead. Okay, so this will just give you an experience of what the stadium and the buildings all kind of come together. Show the park again, the design of which is pending. Pause right there if you don't mind. So the Wells Fargo towers are set back. You have about a 35-foot plaza in front of the entry of each of those. So it'll create this nice, open seating area, and then that, of course, would have outdoor patio seating adjacent to it for that restaurant. So those are twins. They match one another.
Are those bike lanes?
Bike lanes. We have left the road here as is, which includes 2 lanes of traffic, a contraflow lane for the buses, and a bike lane. If Public Works decides to change that, that would be their decision. So that's the traffic as it is. Go ahead, Sherman. There's a view from Portland, so right there. This is one of the interesting connections, I think, is the 2 matching towers will really frame down Portland to the Stone Arch Bridge. So if you were to continue to walk through that, you'd ultimately hit the front of the Stone Arch Bridge and then go across. That's a really important connection and sort of a poetic, city building connection. You have this gateway framing you to a very important part of our history. You can also get an understanding for how tall those buildings would be on the from the opposite side of the park, and then of course what the Skyway and that whole experience would read like. Go ahead, Jim. No one's commented yet on the people walking on the red light.
Mike? Mike?
Yeah.
I have a question over here. So,
Eric.
how many people are going to be in the units? How tall are the 2 towers for Wells Fargo?
Yeah. The towers are about 300 feet tall. The units stored. How many stories? 15 stories.
Okay.
For those. And then the number of units are 5-story residential buildings, 40 units.
And before Wells had said that they were anticipating filling with about 5,000, 5,500 employees too.
Yep. 5,500 employees is what's been published over, and that's the capacity of the towers. Go ahead, Jeremy. This is a nice one to pause it at right here. This gives you a sense of how the Armory would have a presence on the park. So this building, which by the way, that's the retail space I referenced earlier that is park facing, will have some patio space and have a nice landscape edge, but it sits back behind really the central, the lunar shape of the Armory. So the Armory still has a major presence on the park. And then of course the skyline, I think one of the nicest things that we'll all notice is the skyline becomes the backdrop for the park, just with the orientation of the park. So the 6-story building kind of low keeps that park experience engaged with the sky. Go ahead.
What if the owner isn't part part of your project?
It is not, but the park is going to certainly impact it. I think it's going to, catalyze its
Yeah.
its redevelopment.
Right. I have a question.
Yeah.
When you showed that, it's on 4th Street and where the bikes and the cars and the buses went,
Yeah.
why are the bikes in the middle? Why aren't the buses in the middle and the bikes over to one side?
Miles, maybe you can answer this one for us.
Because the direction of the bike lane is the same as the 2 lanes heading east, whereas the contour lane is the one that's heading west.
From this view, you can get an experience for how deep that plaza would be. What we have approved is a tree line, sort of boulevard experience on the street edge. I would assume that gets matched on the park side, but that'll be part of the park process. And then this is where that retail would occur. So there you have room for a restaurant with outdoor patio seating, etc. You just squint, it's totally normal. It's a fun that you're, the parking ramp that you see here, so from this edge back, that has been approved, entitled, we plan to build pending all the agreements Rick talked about, in conjunction with the 2 Wells Fargo blocks, and then the park end block. So those would all be done in conjunction. The Skyway would be opened through, and then the RFP calls out that whatever development goes here or above, or both, would come online last. So that would be done right after the park, or right after the parking lot. So the ultimate view of that would take probably another year to fulfill or more.
And the
plan still to have the ramps substantially completed by the end of 2015?
Yeah, so when I give the context of the entire development, the stadium will be open for its first game in 2016. The park certainly should be open for that game, and we believe it will. The park committee. Our buildings, the 3 on the left of the parking ramp would be done by that time. So you really 2016, summer of 2016, you should be able to head out here and have those 3 major projects done, the redevelopment, the stadium, and the park.
Is the building on the right, the parking ramp, I'm confused.
Yes, sorry if I've been unclear. I'll just say it one more time. This is the parking ramp block. The parking ramp is that component of it, with some elevators and stairs. We are showing housing here. We've shown that for some time because there's an opportunity in a pad site in front of the ramp to build something. This is what it would look like if it were housing. The city also has an RFP out for that property and for air rights above, so something potentially to go above the ramp as well.
So it could be both.
Yes, could be both.
And although Ryan has shown that there, we have no control over what happens there unless we are selected as the developer through the RFP process.
That's right. Thank you, Rick.
If the housing doesn't get built, will you have a facing on the parking ramp? So will it look like the parking ramp on Washington next to the School of Neurology?
Yes.
So
it
open.
would be anticipating a building to come in front of it.
Okay.
The other 3 sides would be built with, full elevations complete, and then in perpetuity they'd stay that way. So those have some great living wall. If you were at the first presentation, they're about 30% green living wall, some precast elements and glass, that sort of thing. Other thoughts? Go ahead.
What's the maximum numbers of stories that plan could be?
This, I would say the first answer is there is no limit. The zoning today allows for 10 stories, and the ramp is 6. So go
Mike,
ahead.
there are still some more questions.
Yeah, fire away.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
I'm curious about the park in Portland Roads. It appears that it's maybe a different material and.
Yeah, okay, so we took some artistic liberties with it. I believe you've heard from a number of people speak to the fact that their consideration will be given to the roads, possibly being narrowed, possibly being of a different paving, done in a way that's park-like. So we're trying to capture that, what that will be. Please take nothing from what we're rendering and take that as what will be. That'll be coming from the park committee itself.
What? Well, one more. Is there a retail component on the first floor of the parking ramp planned currently?
Is there a retail component? There is not currently. Part of our approvals through the city process require that a portion of it will be retail. I think the answer will come with the recipient of the development rights.
Got it.
And whatever goes there will be built in conjunction with
Thanks.
potentially retail.
So I've just read a lot of different times about the people wanting the room for tailgating and all of that. So is that in fact the design and accommodating of what's there today for parking lots and people versus what the development will be?
Right. We are addressing that in the park committee. The Vikings, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but there's representation from many parties on that committee that are impacting the design. Tailgating specifically is not been part of the discussion, but pre-game event certainly is. And with the ability for the Vikings to control what's happening out there on game day, there will certainly be some kind of festive pre-game activity, but I can't speak specifically.
Okay, so we haven't had to leave space flat for the tailgating issues, the developers can have.
We have not had to leave space flat for the tailgate, correct.
These are wonderful questions. I want to make sure we get through all of the content.
So why don't we finish up this very quickly. There's one more component I'd like to point out that Tony's going to speak to.
Great.
And then we'll jump to our wrap-up.
And to the point, because there's just a lot of wonderful content. If for some reason we get to 8 o'clock and then all questions are asked, they're going to linger and you can.
Oh, no.
So anyway, these are great questions. I like the free flow, but I want to make sure we get through these.
Jeremy, why don't you skip the head right out here? Oh, back up a little bit. There you go, pause that. So one area that we haven't talked about is the 3rd Street side of this. Just for quick reference, there is some of the exterior facade of the parking ramp, so you can see the green living wall. These two properties we're showing as 5-story residential. That is a separate phase from the rest of this project. Okay, and Tony is going to hit on the north parcel update, so keep those in mind when we get there. That's what we're referencing, these two U-court-shaped apartments. And with that, we can always do the video some more at the end, but does everyone get a good understanding of what the space is and what the design is? Great.
No, in fact, I'll jump right into that. Go to the next slide, if you would, Jeremy. And I'm speaking on behalf of Tony, not because he can't do it, but because I'm just going to keep us rolling. We originally proposed 200 to 220 units of affordable housing on that north. Mike just showed you these on the video. That's what we call the north parcel. The city required Ryan to agree that we would not seek city affordable housing funds for that site. For reasons that are more in-depth than we'll go into tonight unless you want to ask later. But we have the ability to develop that as housing, and we could pursue affordable housing, but not with city resources. Now that's a tall challenge. Or market rate housing. We can put the office there or other commercial, a hotel could go there, etc. We are subject to height restrictions because we can't go higher than the first floor of the Wells Fargo buildings. So it will be no greater than a several-story development there. And we have an obligation to the city and to Wells Fargo to commence construction on that site by June 1st of 2018. So beyond those realities, we haven't yet settled on a full program, and when we do, Tony Veronco will be the guy to do it. So asking questions at the end. Now, back to you, Mike, for the park design process.
Okay, I'm not going to read through these names, but there was a resolution passed through the city council that identified a group of people to get together to establish the vision and the principles for the park. Now, we were very lucky that David Wilson and our dean, Tom Fisher, from the U of M School of Design, co-chaired the implementation for the stadium. They then translated all that knowledge and all that effort into the park planning. Many of the principles are similar: building a great neighborhood, being a great place for people to come, and a great city to build. So that group is meeting, it's set for the course of the year. Councilmember Fry is part of that group, Eric, wherever he went. Alaska is part of that group, many others. That group will really come out with a document that will establish those principles and vision for the park. So many of the programming thoughts and ideas will be put out there. That will lead to the hiring of an architect, a landscape architect, and the kickoff of a fundraising process that will then go to try to find a design and funds that will help make the park go from good to great. So the vision that we all have for it, it's a very rare experience that you get to build a park from ground up in a city. It's a process, and so everything is on the table right now, and that group is together monthly, meeting and trying to come up with that vision.
We'll close up and then we'll take your questions. Go to the next one, Jeremy. One of the things we talked about was inclusion. I introduced previously Elizabeth Campbell. Elizabeth works, she's a longtime employee of Ryan, works as our emerging business inclusion coordinator and helps us with outreach to help us obtain support from minority and women-owned suppliers and subcontractors and to engage minority and female workforce. We have very specific goals related to this project with respect to the MSFA ramps and ramp and skyways and the city-funded site costs. We are committed to goals that are 9% for minority-owned businesses related to suppliers and subcontractors, and 11% for women-owned businesses. Elizabeth has with her tonight Hoyt Shaw of Shaw Lundquist. Hoyt and his company will do the construction management for a portion of our project,
MSFA ramp.
for the MSFA ramp. And we've worked successfully with Shaw Lundquist in the past at Midtown Exchange and in other ways. Workforce participation, these are very aggressive goals that 32% of the workforce hours, do I have that right, Elizabeth? Is it measured by hours?
Yep.
Will be minority tradespeople and 6% female. And if you wonder about the big disparity, it's just plain difficult to find sufficient female workforce workers to increase that goal. And then on the Wells Fargo towers themselves, we have different goals than on the MSFA and city assets. And so we have a 20% goal where minority-owned businesses, women businesses, small businesses, is that D for disabled? Disadvantaged. I apologize. They collectively add up to a goal of 20% of the dollars on the Wells Fargo Tower. These are aggressive goals. We've undertaken aggressive goals in the past, and we've succeeded in meeting our goals, and we're focused on that in this case as well. And Elizabeth would be happy to answer more questions as we bring things to a close. I think we have just one or two more slides. Groundbreaking, looking ahead. This is another Ryan project that broke ground not too terribly long ago. This is the Shutterfly project in Shakopee. But we expect to have a groundbreaking on this site sometime in the first half of May. We haven't yet set a date, but we certainly want to communicate to you. That's one of the reasons we want to capture your email address if you'd like to remain on our list. And so we'll get more specifics. And then the last slide, looking ahead to our next meeting, which Christy has already scheduled, I think, this space, right, Christy?
Yep.
For a similar time on the evening of May 15th, where we will go through again more design updates and more development updates to the extent we have things to share. At that point, much more will be known about the outcome of the city's RFP on the Block 1 development. So whether we talk about it or the city does, or perhaps another developer, there will be more to talk about there. We want to communicate at that point any changes in the schedule. And then we'll dive more deeply into our demolition plan and schedule so that you know what's coming in terms of buildings that may come down or any traffic impacts that may have on you or on the area. We'll talk about our safety plan, something that we focus on, just to let you know, feel comfortable that there's a very in-depth safety plan from a company that's got a very strong safety track record. And then lastly, we'll talk about how you might communicate with us during the course of the project should something arise that you have concerns about or something that you have an idea about, etc. So that's our May 15th agenda, and I think that's our last slide, isn't it? Correct. So with that, Dan, we'll turn it over to questions.
The free flow of questions was great. I just want to make sure we got through it. And so, what are some more questions about the project that you would like to engage with the entire
We have no development interest or influence over the Armory. That's owned separately. All I can speak is to the fact that with all of this other development coming, I think the park sets the Armory in a very great position. It highlights the Armory. So I would expect something great to come, but we don't know what that is.
A fellow named Doug Hoskin owns the Armory. He has owned it since 1998. It's used as a parking facility today. And he has been working with the design team from Shea, and they're formulating a proposal going forward with pretty aggressive redevelopment of that site. But we don't know any more than Mike has shared.
And it's largely been cost prohibitive just because it's a historic land site and it has all these unique perspectives that kind of force it into certain categories that just make it challenging.
Now, one of the more unique aspects of the historic part of the Armory is that not just the exterior is protected historically, but also the bleachers on the interior. So that significantly decreases the amount of flexibility in terms of what it might become.
Bleachers on rollers and roll them out.
Yeah, see, that's why we have project websites. So
That's
you can
right.
communicate your good ideas.
Great idea. Yes, question?
I don't know if you can, or maybe Ray can speak to it as well, but just about the light rail stop, I mean, it now becomes a major for the hospital, for Wells Fargo, for the residents, I mean, what improvements or changes to the light rail stop?
You know, I was at a meeting earlier this week with the MTC talking about the light rail stop, and also their Commissioner McLaughlin and representatives of CPAD and the MSFA. And there is attention being paid to the fact that that light rail stop in both directions needs to be improved. There's not yet a specific plan. They've been waiting for some of the dominoes to fall to make sure that everything is going forward before they attack the design. But by the time the stadium opens, the central corridor light rail will be, or what do we call it now, the green line? If I remember, I can't remember which one's green, which one's blue. That will be open, and then it's expected, at least for planning purposes, they're still thinking Southwest Corridor will get done by 2018. We'll set aside Southwest Corridor. Just with the green line and the blue line, about every 2.5 minutes, there's a train going through that light rail station. And so there will be increased queuing space. They're planning as if 25 to 35% of game attendees will take light rail transit there by 2018. And so those platforms will get significantly larger, and pedestrian safety and flow in concert with traffic flow is going to be addressed more fully than we have the ability to tell you about tonight.
And I will say, because I'm on the park committee as well, that Michelle Kelgan is really engaged in the design process, and Mike and I even talked about this at the last, well, we presented at the last park committee, that the goal is to have it flow literally from the doors of the stadium, which is a big chunk of space, through that entire transit block into the park space on a continuum. And it will include addressing what right now is a development pad above the underground parking where you see pylons needing to be leveled off and become usable space. Right now it's just kind of a place that collects water.
So that whole triangle is really a concrete lid today, and the idea is that becomes part of the plaza. There's a magic line that's drawn on Park, in which this is really the city's park space, and that the park committee is tackling right now. On the other side of the park, that is part of the MSFA's stadium plaza. Now the intention is they all look and feel similar, like a big grand public open space, but different committees, different responsibilities, so that is now being flushed out, how that design comes together.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question relative to that? So with the LRT lines going through that particular parcel, you can't walk across there except at the streets. I mean, has there been any discussion about some type of elevated access to allow people back and forth from park to the stadium?
Discussions like that have been had at several levels. I think most of them have been casual and suggestive, not how do we go about doing it. So I think a lot of parties were waiting until some of this settled down before reacting fully to the transit block, and that will really come, I think, in the coming 6 months to a year.
This intersection at 4th and Chicago is the one that's of greatest concern from a pedestrian safety standpoint. And one of the things that we're talking about is how to get people to utilize this, how to make it convenient and comfortable to use the skyway to cross that instead of using your feet to cross traffic and the rail. There have been discussions that have included the possibility of a tunnel underneath the rail and other things. So it's being thought of, but no decisions have been made.
Question back there?
What about links from that over to the Stone Arch or to Gold Meadow Park, across Washington, to make that kind of access more natural?
That sounds like a design question.
That is a design question. So Jeremy, I don't know if you can back up a bit. But I think when you're trying to make those connections, you have to do them project at a time, block at a time, right? And so the first thing that we've done is pause right here. From what is going to be one of the nicest, most heavily recognized public spaces in Minneapolis, you certainly have some great new gateways that are sort of suggesting, let's go down there and find out what's down there. Both of those would be landscaped on both sides of the street. We've paid, I think, pretty sincere attention to how the sidewalk experiences would be. And so that is the beginning of what will establish those connections. I think when you develop these 3 blocks with the park in conjunction with all the great things that are happening in the Mill District and on Washington, you only have 1 block in between the 2 now. I think the infill that really establishes great corridors will come as a result of all of this. The city has been quite focused on Chicago, certainly Portland because of the connection to the Stone Arch. So in the cities and CPID's planning, they have certain guidelines and recommendations for those streets as well.
And I might add that David Wilson, who chairs the park committee, has been long engaged in greening and engaging the downtown council to provide public and private partnerships that can help create these corridors from a visual greening standpoint, so you're kind of flowing as opposed to just hard surfaces. Some other questions? Paul in the back, sorry.
Mike, when you presented this to the city implementation committee, you all had those corners of the buildings a lot more glassy, and if I remember correctly, you actually had the skyway pulled closer to the park. And you talked about the fact that as people came through the skyway, they'd be able to visually see into the park.
Right.
People in the park, you could see it. It looks like that went away, or was it a little more de-emphasized?
I wish we could show you the skyway in the lobby. We're not to the point with Wells Fargo where they're comfortable with us sharing that, so that we could show you what that looks like. But it's really going to be a spectacular. What Paul is talking about is, say you're coming from the stadium and you're in the skyway. As you come through this section here where the residents are, you can't see out, right? You have a building in front of you. But when you get to this point, all of these windows are visible from the skyway level, so you come into a large atrium. You can see out, much like in the US Bank building and maybe in the Target retail store downtown. And then, of course, this whole stretch here has great views to the park, certainly the skyway. So, Paul, much of that's been maintained, but we can't show you that in this rendering. Of course, when you're looking at this scale, all those windows seem small, but they're about 10 feet tall, and these ones here, at least, are 12 feet wide, maybe 16 feet wide. So, certainly, we've been paying attention to the experience of get to see the park. We've got some ideas around what we do and the compressions in between where you can see.
One more question, and then we'll shift to the city leadership for the RFP.
Hi, my question was really a clarification of Portland and Chicago. We're not in play, they were going to be closed off. And I play both sides here because I live right near there, and I certainly, I don't want my access cut off. On the other hand, this looks kind of serious. You're going to have traffic going right through the middle of this beautiful park area. How's that all going to work?
I would suggest you contact your council member who's left us. Share with him your thoughts there. Because, he's not. They're important. Certainly, getting the traffic and the cars out of the park was the intention we proposed. The reason we proposed to close down the streets. Chicago, I was not familiar with the time when Chicago was being contemplated as being closed, so really Portland Park. That decision, we have recused ourselves from. The park committee is now, I'd say, the next group that would make that decision on that. There are some complications. They're county roads. They're not city roads. So there's certainly a much larger audience that would have to make that decision.
So this is not necessarily a done
representation of what we think it might be. But that is not our decision to make. That's going to be the city's decision to make, and this is certainly going to be MSFA's decision to make.
And I'll add one comment to that, that in regards to programming, the concept is particularly in non-peak traffic times, weekends, special events, of course events like the Super Bowl, those would be closed. So that there would be large public space, event-driven closures rather than permanent closures. And that's an important thing to note for popular festivals and downtown activities that will draw people in on the weekend where, I live downtown, there's just not much traffic to compete with on most Saturdays and Sundays, so that would be a great way to do that. Great, let's quickly shift to the
Dan,
parcel.
before you do that, can I just, what happened to our, what did it circulate its way all the way
We got,
through?
again, and this is an outstanding way to stay engaged directly with the development company, and the updates are really timely and effective. So I would like to now invite up Bob Lind, who's the Senior Manager for Special Projects at the Community Planning and Economic Development Department. He's got some team members from Mercer who's here, and they're going to discuss the subtleties of the parcel one. So take it over.
Okay, thank you. As mentioned, my name is Bob Lynn. I'm part of the senior management team at CCAD along with Miles Mercer. Two of us, along with others, are part of a team that is working on an RFP that the city has out. It was really great to have the visuals and the three-dimensional. So I really gave you an idea of where is this parking ramp block. So I think people pretty much know where this parking ramp block is. There's the liner parcel. The visual showed housing there, but that's not a given. There's the liner parcel, and then there's the air rights plane above the parking ramp. That's what's part of the RFP that the city has out. And the RFP's been out for, I guess, roughly 8 days now. We've got this RFP out. We're asking for proposals on what to build on that liner parcel as well as the air rights. That proposal, that RFP will be out until February 4th. Tuesday, February 4th is the deadline for proposals to be brought back to the city. At that time, we've got a review team that will be evaluating those proposals, looking at them and so forth. I understand we obviously want to schedule in some times. I think we have a February 6th meeting with one of the groups here to bring some preliminary ideas of who's responded to the RFP and so forth. So the intent is, through this review and evaluation, that eventually we'll bring to the city council. We're scheduling that sometime, probably the latter part of March, to bring to the city council a recommendation on designating who that developer would be for the liner parcel as well as for the air rights above the parking ramp. The intent, of course, is to move this along so that we can coordinate this with Ryan Companies and the construction of the parking ramp, which will start in the fourth quarter of 2014, be substantially done in the fourth quarter of 2015, so that the developer for the liner parcel and the air rights above the ramp can start their construction at that time when the ramp is substantially complete, which is an obvious assumption that needs to be made for starting construction. Miles, any other items we should maybe mention this time?
I'll just underline that we are pursuing an aggressive schedule to get this all together. We put together the RFP document very quickly. We got it out to the public very quickly, and we were asking for responses relatively quickly at February 4th. We need to make a decision very quickly. And the reason for that compressed schedule is because of the timeline needed to design the ramp. If the ramp design needs changes or accommodations to accommodate a structure above it, Ryan needs time to incorporate that into their design. So in order to stay on track with Ryan's schedule to begin construction of the ramp this fall, we need to know as soon as possible what's happening, particularly with the air rights, so that we can make any accommodations as possible. So that's a big driver. And if we're going to realize this opportunity to see something built above the ramp, we basically have to do it now. There's not really gonna be a chance to go back and retrofit the ramp for something later. There's a smaller chance of doing that. So that's what's driving our schedule.
Questions or comments?
Can you speak to the criteria that the city will use to determine who's awarded the RFP?
Okay, criteria for the RFP. The RFP speaks to, the possibility of, obviously housing, hotel, commercial, other types, office types of development. We'll be looking at, I guess, Miles, we characterize it, we'll be looking at how does it fit in with the overall plans for the area, how does it address issues of green construction and so forth.
Yeah, I'd say there's multiple criteria. One would be, what's the price that the developer is offering to pay? That's an important criteria. What are they willing to pay for this land in this area? Second would be, what are they proposing? How does it fit? How desirable is it for this sort of adding vitality to this area? How desirable is it in terms of adding to the property tax base of the city and bringing jobs or housing units to this city? We'd like to see something that happens here that maximizes the opportunity, that brings some density, that takes advantage of being right next door to a light rail station. But we also are going to look at what's the track record of this proposer. What do we think is their ability to actually pull this off? So there's multiple criteria that we'll be looking at.
Now there was some. Go ahead, Rick.
I wonder if one of the two of you could explain what the city is likely to do with the proceeds from selling the development rights?
I would say that is undetermined at this point. That
Okay.
is something that the city council would ultimately decide. But one idea has been to use the proceeds from the sale to go into the park.
I know one of the earlier questions was about how tall would this development be, and there was reference to the zoning for this particular site mandates that 10 stories, ramp being 6 stories or plus. But it can be more than that. The city is looking for intense development. It's going to maximize all the things that Miles mentioned and so forth. So it's possible some development could be proposed, could be taller than 10 stories, and the city would consider that as well. So it does not need to be less than 10 stories. It could be something taller than that.
So I'm not sure this may be a question for Ryan, but was the ramp's height limited in what was the amount of spaces that needed to be accommodated there to handle all of the Wells Fargo employees?
The ramp size was determined far more by the needs of the Vikings and the available dollars to pay for the ramp than it was by Wells Fargo employees. So Wells Fargo employees will make individual decisions about whether or not they want to park there or somewhere else, or they want to take transit or bike or walk. So there's no specific Wells Fargo commitment and no specific commitment of the ramp to Wells Fargo. The Vikings and the MSFA had a certain budget, and we had to strike a balance between that budget, their need for premium patron parking on game days, and the generation of revenue to help pay for the park and the parking ramp. So it was more of an economics equation. It ended up at 1,610 spaces and 6.5 stories.
And there was not a height limitation on it.
So there will be at least 1,610 parking stalls in the ramp as required.
Yes,
Yeah, a clarification on the minor parcel portion. On the renderings, we saw the cool green living wall on at least 2 sides. I don't know if that's on the 3rd side as well. Is the minor parcel just on the park side?
The liner parcel is just on that park side, so
Okay.
those other walls and other sides are part of Ryan's development of the parking ramp itself.
Right, and it has maybe a very short bay that is on Chicago,
On Chicago.
right, as it turns the corner.
Okay.
That could be retail.
Yes?
I might have missed it, but what's envisioned for in the air over the parking ramp? What kind of people are bidding on that?
Well, we have the RFP out now, so we don't know who's going to bid on and so forth. We've met with a number of potential developers and so forth. It could be any combination of a number of things. It could be hotel above it, it could be office space. We've seen, talk about the liner parcel itself, having residential and so forth. So it could be any or a combination of possible developments above that parking ramp. And as Miles mentioned, needing to move or make a selection so that the design work on the structural part of the parking ramp can accommodate whatever development is selected to be atop the parking ramp.
Can you say who you're expecting replies from on that RFP?
It's in the Q&A. You can say who's on the conference call that too.
Yeah. We have, like I said, the RFP's been out there for about 8 days. It closes on February 4th. We did hold a conference call, if you will, for people that were interested in so forth, just to, weigh in, ask questions and so forth. So we did have a number of developers on that, both in town and out of town. There were 1 or 2 from the Colorado area? At least one from Colorado, called the Paul's Corporation, that was on the line. So there are definitely interest in the, what's going to be a very unique opportunity to be part of this.
Can you say who from the area was on the call?
Yes, we can. And this all this information is posted online.
Sure.
There's a specific web page for the RFP where we posted this information. But ones that come to my mind that I can recall, Ryan Companies was on the call, Sherman Associates was on the call, Ackerberg Group had a representative,
White Properties.
White Properties had a representative, the folks from Denver, Brunsfield Property that did a project in North Loop. Those are the main ones that I recall.
Yeah, so there's about a half dozen or so, yeah.
And did you say there's no height limitation on how high that can go?
Well, the zoning itself is was it D4N?
Yeah, so the zoning, as of right, someone can build a 10-story structure there. So the ramp already is 6.5. So you can go up to 10.
It can't be higher than the Wells Fargo towers.
Well, no, so the zoning as of right allows 10, but if you go and petition, a proposer could petition to go higher than 10. Petition the city, and say, hey, we'd like to go higher, this is why. And the city then would have discretion to approve whether or not it can go higher than 10. But up to 10, they don't need any special permission.
I may have missed this. What is happening to the parking lot that's kind of under the light rail, which is under the park?
That will be purchased by the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority on presumably on January 23rd. And that will be part of the overall parking supply for the stadium and for the area. And Ryan will manage that ramp beginning January 1st of 2016.
So the entrance and the exit of that ramp will be in the middle of the park?
It'll be maintained off of Park Avenue at the northerly side of the park, right?
So where it is today is the best knowledge we have on where it stays. Now the decking on top of it we touched on earlier, the large portion of that that's open concrete right now. Now what we were showing, and certainly what I believe is going to happen, is that that's going to become part of the new transit stop.
Right. But that particular block itself is really not part of Ryan Company's 5, I guess we call it 5-block area, nor is it part of the
It's
block
actually
1.
called Block 6.
Yeah.
I have an off-the-wall question. Unrelated. Well, what time is the dome being completed on Saturday?
They've actually, Michelle Kelly spoke at East Town Council meeting today about that, and said it's a variable depending on high winds or low winds. So there's safety concerns, that kind of mitigate when it will happen. They did say if somehow you miss it, they will have footage of it.
That's a great question. I mean, it's going to happen like within 20 minutes to a half an hour. So I mean, it'll have to be social media. It'll have to do something.
Shooting fireworks or set off an alarm. So I'm sorry, it sounded variable.
Is there any planned time?
Not that I was. She didn't announce it. And managing expectations are the biggest challenge that the MSFA has on a lot of these factors, and so she wouldn't give it. She did say that you should know this, that all of the materials, including the roof, are going to be repurposed up to 90% of all materials on that site will be repurposed for other projects. An impressive measure of reuse of materials.
How many people were amazed that they were buying so many of these plastic seats? Okay,
Any other questions? Well, May 15, Thursday, May 15 is the next forum that we will have of joint neighborhood associations. Many thanks to the open book, they gave us this for free. So I just have to say,